how did you and why did you end up moving from an organization where you had effectively created your career, your public profile, to the University of Buckingham? What happened there?
Yeah, I mean, well, so first of all, to say that I was at Birkbeck for 20 years. And, I think we were just talking before the show that, I'd always leaned kind of culturally to the right, not on every issue, but on certain issues. And I'd always kept that to myself, and it became a habit. I just never even thought about it because academia is a very left-wing, particularly culturally very left-wing place in the social sciences and humanities, especially where I was. But, I had been a full professor since 2011 at Birkbeck. And by the time we get to like 2017, 2018, you've got the rise of populism. I was feeling a lot more secure in a way. And I just sort of decided, well, you know what, we're just going to sort of nail our colors to the mast a little bit, not in any unprofessional way. Now, what I'd say is that the book White Shift itself really isn't what landed me in any hot water, because a lot of social justice activists, I mean, almost all of them never read, and certainly not a book. They'll read a tweet, but not a book. What happens in this case is that I had, become more active on social media, on Twitter, since about 2016. And it was really around 2018 that the first offense archaeologists were sort of trying to rummage back and find anything. They didn't really find anything, but they were trying to spin up tweets that they thought were offside. Basically anything critical of the social justice movement, be that Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ. So, for example, Justin Trudeau, I'm Canadian, and Trudeau, who, made this speech and he couldn't pronounce LGBTQ. I can't pronounce it. So yeah, he tried about 3 or 4 times and he couldn't get through it. And that was kind of a joke. And so I retweeted that video and just, making fun of him. And all of these things kind of were accumulated into the first of several Twitter mobbings and internal investigations that were prompted by complaints, generally by radical students or staff members. So that's kind of like the beginning of the troubles that I was having. I had one open letter. I went along to a debate in 2018 that Matt Goodwin was hosting with David Aronovich and Trevor Phillips. And it initially was entitled, "Is Ethnic Diversity a Threat to the West?" ? Is somebody like Trevor Phillips and David Aronovich going to be saying yes to that? Probably not. And none of us really were, but that was enough to sort of, they were forced to change the title of that. I was kind of, a very woke staff member was kind of giving me the gears for going and participating in this. But that kind of gives you a sense of the kinds of things that were landing me in hot water. Now, none of that meant that they were going to fire me necessarily, but they certainly would put you through the kangaroo court and make you think that some terrible punishment, and they certainly wouldn't say, "We're never going to fire you." So it's sort of left hanging in the air, and these things usually come to some kind of conclusion where, well, you've done wrong and you've broken these policies and you've been found guilty, but so it's never made clear because they know legally there's just really no easy way for them to get rid of you. But that's the kind of, just being under that, receiving that email, being under the sort of hammer like that really gets your mind racing, and they know that puts the pressure on, and so next time you'll shut up. Of course, I didn't shut up, but most people would, and I think that's kind of an example of one of the pressures. It wasn't it was a pressure. Then the University of Buckingham, which is the only one out of 181 UK higher education institutions that strictly prioritizes academic freedom over social justice. Overt. The VC James Tooley is, he's a champion of free speech, and that's exceedingly rare in Britain. And there are a few conservative academics there. Still, it's majority, I would say, lean to the left, but you have more viewpoint diversity. And so I had been just, interested in Buckingham, talking to them over a number of years. And then I decided to leave at Birkbeck, and I thought, we'll go to Buckingham and we'll set up something new. And I wanted to try and set up something. So, for example, I teach a course on woke that is open online. I wanted to set up a research center where we could look into all those problems that had been neglected or where only one viewpoint was allowed in the social sciences. And so that became this new Center for Heterodox Social Science, which I launched in February. And actually, we had Neil Ferguson give a keynote speech along with Matt Goodwin, trying to sort of just say, well, we want to try and do an alternative countercultural social science and go against the grain in a way. Because in media, you have a lot of people going against the grain in the new media. It's much harder in academia because there's so many startup costs and it's very hard to start new institutions. But I thought Buckingham was a place maybe we can do it, or at least we can maybe get enough of a beachhead that we can start introducing new kinds of knowledge production that go against the orthodoxy.
It's remarkable that it feels very like that Robert Conquest, the three, I can't remember what it is, the three laws of, Conquest 3 laws it's called. And the third one is any organization that is not set up as being explicitly right-wing will just become left-wing over time. Now, what you're setting up isn't necessarily a right-wing organization, but I wonder if there's a cut across there. It's anything that is not set up explicitly to promote a kind of academic freedom, a freedom of thought, a freedom of expression, articulation, will slide down the authoritarian route. Do you think there's anything in that, considering that's one university out of 181?
I think there isn't. By the way, I know John O'Sullivan, who's now based in Budapest, but he's wrote for National Review and other places. And I think this is O'Sullivan's law that Conquest is borrowed from. So I just wanted to sort of put that in there. But yeah, I think there's a lot to that. And this leftward drift in institutions is something you can see very clearly in public opinion data in the US, for example. Why is that the case? I mean, I think one of the reasons is that the drift of modern culture is towards the cultural left. And that's been going on for decades, and it's just been accelerating in many ways. And part of the reason is also because of cultural realignment. So politics is now left now means cultural left, whereas maybe in 1950 it meant economic left. So part of this is that cultural left is a good fit with a lot of where avant-garde intellectuals and professionals are. And yeah, I also think the other part of this is that after 1965 in America and after, slightly later in Britain, you have this anti-racism taboo, which then is, in my view, the fulcrum. It's kind of the sun or North Star around which our entire moral order revolves. And this is a point I make in my new book, Taboo, which is that once you had that new race taboo come in the mid-60s, everything changed and people wrote about it. Paul Krugman did a piece in the New York Times remembering the one summer where all of a sudden it became forbidden to, have a black coachman on your gate, which probably I think we might agree is not a great idea, but there was this suddenness of this introduction. And of course it was reasonable to have a norm against racism, but very quickly that doesn't have a bound, so it sort of moves out and expands. So 1965, you suddenly had this report on the black family by Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan saying, well, we've got a fatherlessness rate of 25%, which sounds very low nowadays. The white rate has exceeded that, certainly. But at the time, it was seen, this could be a problem. That was a report that was shelved because it was seen as upsetting the black community. That was the first time that kind of thing had happened. It was the beginning of where we are now. So I think I put a lot of emphasis on that critical juncture of the rise of the anti-racism taboo. It's a bit of sacredness. Once that sacredness is there around race, you can stretch it around. You can borrow it if you are a feminist movement, if you are gay, trans, etc. You can borrow that magic, and suddenly you can shut down debates in a whole bunch of different areas. So yeah, I put a lot of emphasis on that as a key development. And that's one of the reasons why I also don't think that what we're living through is so dramatically new. It's just that the scale has expanded.